IMO is kind of the not-so-secret sauce of Korean natural farming, capturing wild native microbes from your area. But as simple as it sounds, put a box of rice in the forest, let it sit for a few days. Sometimes getting a really good collection feels like a lot more hassle than it's worth. So in this video, I want to break down everything that I have learned so far about collecting perfect IMO, or as close to perfect as you can get. We're going to cover collection boxes, rice preparation, loading the boxes, finding a good spot, timing, and everything else involved in capturing this incredible substance. I'll be honest with you, I'm really excited to share this technique because I really believe that we need more IMO in more gardens. And that's a strange belief, I know, but the fact is we have to start normalizing this stuff. I think that we would all benefit from engaging with nature on this kind of intimate level. And I'll just say that I struggled in the past getting good collections. I've tried so many times, and sometimes it's worked, other times it hasn't. Most of the times, really, it hasn't worked. So if you've tried to get a good collection in the past and it just hasn't worked, I think this video should give you a good framework for getting back on the horse and trying again. But first, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor, and I teach gardeners ways to upgrade their game through alternative and DIY techniques like IMO. And if you haven't yet, I'd love it if you would check out my free ebook, A Beginner's Guide to IMO. I'll link to it in the description. Anything to help you on your journey toward more sustainable and regenerative approaches to growing. I do not claim to be an expert on any of this stuff, nor do I think I've figured it all out. I just want to share what I've learned, and if it can help you, that would be great. So, what is IMO? IMO stands for Indigenous Microorganisms. These are primarily fungi and bacteria found in your local ecosystem. IMO is a four-stage process of collecting, preserving, diversifying, and integrating, but today we're just going to focus on step one, the collecting. Now, if you've never heard of IMO before, or maybe you need a refresher, essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the fertility and abundance of nature, and we are eventually introducing it into our own microecosystem of our garden or farm. This is a technique that was originally developed by a man named Cho Han-kyu in South Korea. IMO is a way to bring fertility to your soil, disease resistance to your plants, and it honestly integrates into so many systems within a garden. It's so worth getting down. When I was first getting started gardening, I very quickly got to see the impact of culturing IMOs and applying them to my garden soil by using Jadam microbial solution, which is a far faster way of culturing the microbes. And that said, JMS microbes are a great short-term burst of microbes, but IMO is kind of here to stay. Once you get it into your soil, it starts its magic and it persists month after month, season after season. So I'll help you invest some time into learning how to get a really good IMO collection, if not a perfect one. But first, I should clarify how I'm defining a perfect collection. This is a very complicated topic with a lot of guesswork involved. And I'll be honest, I have not made the investment in a microscope, so I have to rely on the research that others have done on this topic. And that said, I'll link to some studies in the description should you like to explore that further. A perfect IMO collection is one where all of the biology in the box is white and fuzzy. We actually don't want a collection with a whole lot of color in it, which can feel confusing when we think that we're shooting for max diversity, and we are. We just want the highest level of microbial diversity in a collection. But in order to accomplish that, we actually need to start off with a slightly more narrow view of the appropriate microbes. If you want to skip ahead to the method, feel free, but otherwise just bear with me here because I know a lot of you appreciate it when I get into the specifics of the biology, so that's what I'm going to overview. Generally speaking, with an IMO collection, we are trying to collect saprophytic fungi, actinomycetes, and other beneficial bacteria, as well as protozoa and some yeasts. The only ones visible to the naked eye are going to be the fungi, the actinobacteria, and possibly some of the yeasts. The fluffy white hyphae indicates trichoderma, basidiomycetes, penicillium, and mycorrhizal fungi spores. The actinomycetes are represented in a sort of powdery white to gray webbing, sometimes chalky looking, and then sometimes you can see some of the visible yeast accumulation in the form of a kind of white film. These microbes, along with other bacteria and protozoa, serve a huge variety of functions. Specifically, fungi are excellent at breaking down tough organic material like lignin and cellulose. They transport nutrients and moisture through the soil, and they connect plant roots via mycorrhizal networks Actinomycetes decompose complex compounds in the soil, and they release selective antibiotics that suppress pathogens, and they help bridge the gap between fungi and bacteria in the soil. The other invisible microbes are going to aid in nitrogen fixation, nutrient solubilization, hormone and enzyme production, and then protozoa will help with nutrient cycling and nitrogen creation in plant available forms. All of these functions are what you want happening in your garden. Now, as far as some other microbes that have more colorful appearance, the most common ones that you're going to find in your collection box will be green, blue, black, pink, orange, and yellow. So green, blue colors, they're going to indicate overgrowth of mature penicillium, aspergillus, and occasionally trichoderma. A little bit of these in your collection is not the end of the world, but if your whole collection is covered with them, it can indicate an unbalanced collection that could take over the beneficial microbes mentioned before. Black molds are going to be your enemy in a collection box because they indicate anaerobic bacteria that indicates low microbial diversity. This stuff will more likely encourage pathogens rather than the beneficial decomposers. So try to avoid all black mold in your collections. Not really worth using at all, in my opinion. As far as the brighter colors like orange, yellow, and pink biology, a little tiny bit in a collection is not game over, but if you've got a lot of these colors in your box, it's likely contaminated with slime molds or some other unhelpful bacteria. They'll stop beneficial bacteria from getting really established, and in the end, they'll limit the amount of diversity that your collection will bring. Now, I recognize that that is a lot of information, but beyond listing just a few of the many types of microorganisms here, it's worth mentioning that due to the inherent adaptive nature of microbes, the fungi and bacteria found in your exact area are going to be unique to your exact area. I could ship you a collection of my IMO, but it wouldn't contain the exact strains of microbes that have been forced to emerge in your unique climate. Additionally, microbes can develop in different ways and create brand new substrains within one general location, just yards away from each other. In another video, we'll talk about how to further diversify your IMO collections, but for now, the diversity here is almost beyond measurement. We're talking about millions of degrees of microevolution that fray in millions of directions. With that, we can just be humbled by the unseen complexity within the world of microbes and move on to getting a really good collection. When you're looking for a good collection space for your IMO boxes, there are a few key things that you want to be looking for. The main one and the most obvious is that you should not be looking for a place that people are walking on frequently, if at all. You're going to need to carefully and gently get off of the beaten path a little bit, not only so that you can find some good undisturbed microbes, but also so that no one will disturb your attempt to collect your IMO. Another thing is that you want to be looking in a deciduous forest, especially if you don't have tons of experience collecting IMO, because it's a bit trickier in coniferous forests. That's a topic for a different video. For your first dozen collections, stick to forests that are deciduous trees. Try to find a tree that is fairly mature. These types of trees will often contain the aged microbes that you're looking for. One of the main things that you're really looking for here are visible signs of mycelium. These are the fine white strands that indicate healthy microbial activity. And you can often find these where fallen logs are decomposing, especially in slightly damp areas. And once you've got conditions right, you will want to gently clear your space, brush aside the fallen leaves to expose the bare soil, and then take some pieces of wood and leaves with mycelium on them and place them underneath your boxes. So look for leaf litter, visible white mycelium strands, decomposing sticks. Now, this is the key to the technique here. Leave all of your boxes in this spot, slightly spaced apart, but all in a fairly similar location. Just place them on the ground and then gently pile up the leaf litter around them and on top of them to disguise the boxes from any person or critters in the forest. You're also protecting the boxes from harsh elements. If you live in a really rainy area, you might need to tie up a tarp above the IMO boxes to keep the water off. You don't want your box getting rained on directly. It'll very likely ruin your collection. But for me, it hardly ever rains here in Eastern Washington during the summer, so I think I'm safe to leave it uncovered. Again, make sure that mycelium pieces are surrounding all of the boxes if possible. This should more or less ensure that at least some inoculation of the rice will occur. Now that you've got your boxes placed, take pictures so that you can remember where they are. drop a pin on your Maps app. Make sure that you don't forget where you put these guys, because it would be a huge bummer to lose them. And now it's just time to wait. How long is always the question, and it depends on a lot of factors, but the most influential one is the temperature. High temps will result in IMOs colonizing the rice more quickly, lower temps more slowly. I have found that temps above 45 degrees Fahrenheit at night and below 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the day are when I can collect really good IMO. Colder than 45, and it seems like it just gets a lot trickier for me. Below 40, and I think it's nearly impossible. Maybe I'll find out how one day, but for collecting perfect IMO every time, I recommend trying your collections when the low temps are just above 40 and preferably 45 or warmer. And that said, if it's really warm during the days following your box deposit, like 60 to 90 degree range, I'd go ahead and check your first box after 48 hours just to see how things are going. For lower temps, like between 45 to 65, you probably want to wait at least 4 days before retrieving your first box. Now, whenever you do go to get your collection box, you are only going to remove one of them. At this point, crack open the corner of the paper towel and take a peek inside, and depending on what you see will determine your next move. The thing with IMO is that the collection process is very delicate. Even a minor disturbance can sort of throw things off. And from the moment that you lift up the paper towel, you want to get the collection preserved in brown sugar. If it's a good one, that is. See if you have a good amount of fungal bloom, like white fuzz is just completely covering the rice. If that's the case, congrats, you've got a good collection most likely. And I'd recommend taking one other box home at least. Take pictures of it so that you know what you're looking at when you go to collect the other boxes another day. But if there's a lot of white stuff on your rice, you've probably got a pretty good collection. Now, more likely what will happen is that you'll crack open the first box and you'll see nothing or very little biological development on your rice. Not a problem, leave your other boxes undisturbed. Take this one home, open it up when you get back, take a look at it, pull it apart a bit and get a sense for what fungal development has occurred. You might be surprised at what is formed, especially around the edges and on the bottom of the box. Now, this is not going to be considered a perfect collection, which is no problem, but you don't want to go ahead and preserve this stuff. Instead, just compost it however you like. I like to toss mine in the bokashi bin. Now, wait another day or two, depending on what you saw in the first box. If you saw nothing at all, even after pulling it apart, you probably want to wait at least 2 more days before checking the second box. If you saw a little bit of fungal growth on the sides and the bottom, you could check the next box the next day, especially if temperatures are warm. That said, now you get to collect another box without having to restart the whole process over again. You can just go out and retrieve another box another time, take a peek, take it home, take pictures, and continue collecting. Now, even if you get a really good collection and you still have another box waiting there, I would still recommend leaving that box for just a little bit so that you can retrieve it later and continue to learn about the IMO in your area. It's possible that even more white fuzz shows up on your rice and you get an even better collection. It's also possible that your box will start growing colorful molds, and now you get to see what a spoiled IMO collection looks like. The point is, regardless of whether you get a good collection or not anytime, you have to see each time as an experience that is teaching you something. You're learning about the nature in your area, and you're becoming more sensitive to the nature of microbes. All collections are good for you, even ones where you grew black mold, because it allows you to figure out how not to collect IMO. Whatever type of collection that you get, something I would really appreciate if you would just go to the small trouble of taking a picture and sending it to me. You can send it to taylor@thegriffinfamilyfarm.com, and I would be so thrilled to see it, even if it's a bad collection or if it's a good one. But if you want a second opinion, I would love to see those. And who knows, if I get enough from y'all, maybe I can showcase your successes and your anonymous failures in a future video. I'll start by showing you the type of box that I have found to be the most helpful in really mastering IMO collection. You can make these very cheaply if you have access to the materials, of course. I'll show you how I make these, but if you can't find these materials, there are plenty of ways that you can collect microbes in different types of containers. This is just what has worked best for me. To make this exact box, you will need a 6-foot untreated cedar fence post. You can pick these up at most hardware stores, at least in North America. Can't speak to other countries, but I would love to hear in the comments because I know that a lot of you are watching from outside the US. In addition to the cedar fence post, you're gonna want some 1/4-inch hardware cloth And then for tools, you need something to cut the boards with, a hammer and nails or some screws, 1/4-inch drill bit and a drill, and then a stapler and a paper towel, and that's just what I use to make my boxes. For the dimensions of these boxes, I make 4 9-inch cuts, and then I cut one of the 9-inch pieces in half widthwise so that I have 2 4.5-inch pieces. Then I shave off 1 inch from one of the 9-inch pieces and cut it lengthwise into 3 pieces, 2 of which that are approximately 2 inches wide. And these are going to be the slats that make up the bottom of the collection box. Once I've got all these pieces cut, I assemble them by drilling pilot holes through the ends, and then I hammer in some nails through. The pilot holes are optional, but since the boards are only a 1/2 inch thick, I think it's nice to not have to worry about splitting the boards too much. Once I've got the walls attached, I do the same with the slats at the bottom, and here I'm just trying to space them out relatively easy. You don't want huge gaps in the bottom so that all the rice falls out, but that being said, the rice is sticky, so it'll hold together in there. Once the slats are in, go ahead and drill a few evenly spaced out holes into the side of the box. Specifically on the bottom half, I like to put 7 on the long sides and 5 on the smaller ends. And lastly, you need to measure and cut a piece of your hardware cloth so that it will fit over the top of your box snugly. This is really helpful for keeping out debris and rodents from your box. And then the last piece of your box is a paper towel, which you'll use a new one each time. That's the only part of the box other than the rice that has a one-time use. There are reasons why I like this box. The cedar contains naturally deterring oils that keep pests away and also help reduce the risk of harmful bacteria. It's a pretty affordable option. This board cost me $4 and I get 2 boxes out of it plus the hardware cloth. And it's durable, a solid option in my opinion. Now we'll get into this later, but I'm gonna strongly recommend for this technique that you go ahead and make at least 4 of these boxes, which you can do with just 2 cedar fence posts. Again, make sure that they're untreated. Now that we've got our boxes, let's talk rice. There's a sort of specific way to cook the rice for IMO Collection, and the simplest way that I can put it is that you're cooking it so that it is just barely inedible on the undercooked side. So you need the rice to be a little bit moist so that the biology can utilize the carbohydrates, but you can't really have this stuff gumming up. I don't have a rice cooker, I just use a 1-gallon Dutch oven. The rice I'm using is the Calrose rice from Costco. It's a short grain white rice. And for every 1 cup of rice, I add just a little bit under 1 cup of water, which is slightly less than what I use to cook rice for eating. For this method of capturing IMO 1, cook 5 cups of dried rice and approximately 4.5 to 5 cups of water. This is gonna vary for each exact climate based on the humidity and other factors. I'm in a pretty dry climate, so this is how I cook my rice. Making this amount of rice makes it so that I have cooked enough rice to fill 4 of my cedar boxes, a little under halfway full. I fluff up the rice to make sure that it's not clumpy, and I don't press it down in the box. I just let it settle naturally. The rice should be spread evenly. You don't want any huge bumps or a high end just flat across without being patted down. The rice should be 2 to 3 inches thick. Any less and it can dry out pretty easily, and much more, and you kind of run the risk of it clumping and going anaerobic. And then once the boxes are filled, I take 1 sheet of paper towel and I staple it down to seal it up. This way debris stays out, but microorganisms can get in through the paper. Then I put the hardware cloth over the top of the box for extra protection and stability. Now at this point, we are ready to take our boxes to the forest. But if it's your first time ever collecting IMO, or you just feel like you want a little bit of practice before taking your boxes into the wilderness, you can do a low risk version of this at home using the soil in a really thickly mulched location where mycelium has formed, or near where your compost pile. The microbes you collect here won't be the same as the wild microbes, but it can give you a sense of what you're trying to do without having to leave your land. Again, this does not really replace real IMO, it's just for practice sake. If, however, you're ready to get out into the woods, now's the time. Whenever you get your perfect collection, you are going to want to take it home right away and get it mixed up with some brown sugar, because this is going to cause the microbes to go into a state of dormancy, and it will freeze their development and keep them from spoiling. Start by weighing your collection so that you know how much brown sugar you'll need to add. And here's something really important. You actually don't need that much IMO to have enough for your whole garden. So pick out the best pieces within your collection. Discard any of the blue or green or colorful bits. Only choose the white, thick, matted rice clumps to preserve. And once you've weighed out your collection, add equal parts brown sugar by weight and mix it up. Go ahead and get every piece of rice mixed up in the brown sugar so that it's all coated. Break up the chunks, and over a short period of time, you will see the liquid starting to come out of the rice. This is a staple Korean natural farming technique of preserving microbes. You really need to use brown sugar because the moisture is getting pulled out of the IMO rice through something called osmotic pressure. Osmosis is the process of equalizing the concentrations on each side of the cell membrane. Basically, water is being removed from the rice and the IMOs are getting dried out, which makes them go dormant so that they don't die off. Don't use molasses here. It's not recommended that you use white sugar or really anything but brown sugar. You could probably use an unrefined sugar like turbinado or something. But just to be safe, I always use a nice brown sugar. Once you've got it mixed up, you can wait a little bit for the moisture to get all pulled out, and then you can transfer it into a fermentation vessel. I like using jars, and then just cover it up with a breathable lid and leave it in a cool, dark space for 3 days to a week. This part of the process is helping the microbes stabilize. If you see a lot of bubbling after a few minutes or hours, you're going to want to add some more brown sugar to the collection to try to shut down the activity, because you don't want them going into a feeding frenzy. You actually want them to just go to sleep. Once you've passed this step, you can breathe a sigh of relief and celebrate your newly caught indigenous microorganisms. Show your friends, show your family, your neighbors, you know how cool you are. At this point, you can store it in a cool, dark environment for a year or more. You can seal it up and put it in the fridge to make sure that it's fully preserved. Again, you only need a little bit of this stuff. A little goes a long way. And speaking of which, now that you've got your IMO 2, you're ready to take it to the next step, IMO 3, but that is a video for another day. You can check out our video on that already if you're ready. But otherwise, thank you for watching through to the end. If you made it this far, you've got a phenomenal attention span. Have fun with this, guys. Remember that failure is a good thing. Send me those pictures of your collections. I would love to be able to show them off in a future video. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.